Welcome back to State of the Nation. Unemployment has risen to 5.1%, the highest level in 4 years, and has been rising for 14 consecutive months. This time last year, unemployment stood at 4.3%, and those paying the highest price are young workers. In 3 months, unemployment among 18 to 24-year-olds rose by 85,000, the largest increase in 2 years. Redundancies have risen to their highest level since the pandemic, and private sector employment has been shrinking for more than a year. These outcomes did not happen by accident. Employers are telling us why they are so restrained in the face of uncertainty over taxation, rising national insurance costs, and mixed messages from the government ahead of both their budgets. Many firms stopped hiring new staff and others cut jobs because taking on new staff has become unaffordable. At the same time, public sector wages are rising at more than 7%, while private sector pay growth is slowing to under 4%. Resources, which are all created by the private sector, the public sector does not create wealth, are being directed towards expanding public sector employment, even as the private sector, the engine of job creation, contracts. This removes incentives to work and makes welfare a lifestyle choice. Tax and welfare system that weakens the incentive to work, high taxes making hiring harder, while increasing welfare spending risks trapping people outside the labour market altogether. It is killing the jobs market. Instead of encouraging the transition into work, the system discourages it. You know the story. £71,000 a year in the private sector to be enough to make up for benefits if you have 3 children. So the private sector suffers, and that's where wealth is created, and Labour's policies seem deliberately to be exacerbating the situation. Unsustainable increases in the minimum wage, leading businesses to warn that higher wage price workers can't be afforded, they can't be paid for, and it leads to inflation as well. And these are the result of political choices made in Downing Street. It is a choice made by Rachel Reeves and Sir Keir Starmer, and they're choices that misunderstand basic economics, ignore employer behaviour, and prioritise state employment and welfare over growth, enterprise and productivity. The result is a weaker economy, fewer opportunities, and a generation of young people being left behind. We are in an economic doom loop. As ever, let me know what you think. mailmog@gbnews.com. But I'm now joined by my most pugnacious panel, the Conservative MP for Romford, Andrew Rosindell, and the journalist and broadcaster, Michael Crick. I think that did need saying. I think it's basically a mistaken view of what's happened. I think that our economy has been particularly badly hit because deliberate Downing Street policies and, of course, the crazy green agenda that is costing business so much money and making us uncompetitive globally.
Jacob, what you've said is completely right. I'm sorry, Michael, but Brexit is nothing to do with the situation we're in today. It's a failure of our government, the Labour government, in the policies that it's pursued when it got elected to office. We were in a far better position prior to the last general election. Today, we're heading downward spiral. It's a catastrophe for our country. Their policies are not working, but then socialist governments always end up in the same type of mess. Nothing to do with Brexit. A lot to do, I think...
Saying
hang on, no, you've had to say. A lot to do with those crazy lockdowns that we had. We've got the debts. Well, I disagreed with them. I voted against them. So we had those lockdowns. That's left us with a huge debt. That's changed the psychology of the country in a very detrimental way. But more than that, since July 24, Labour have increased taxes massively. They've increased welfare massively. They've got us into further debt. And they've adopted policies which are anti-growth. If you want a successful economy, you need to liberalise the economy, you need free market policies, you need high growth and low welfare. They've done the opposite. It's not surprising that unemployment is rising under those conditions.
Well, I would never expect two arch Brexiteers like you, who will go to your graves believing it was still a jolly good idea, despite the fact that you two and others like you have shrunk the economy significantly already, Michael, with further shrinkage to come beyond what it would otherwise be.
So why is it that the UK economy, since the quarter that we left the European Union, has grown faster than France, Germany and Italy?
Well, there are all sorts of factors as to why the economies go up and down.
Okay, but ours has performed
ours would
better than the European Union's big economies.
And it would have performed even better if we...
On a possible basis.
Well, just
make that argument.
Just on the basis that if you trade with
in the way America did.
If you trade with Europe, it's so much harder than it used to be.
Our trade with Europe has gone up
because of the European Union. They have punished Britain. What they've done, they hated Brexit.
Right.
They hated the fact that we had the courage to say no. We're not going to be controlled by Brussels anymore. They don't like it, and they've made it as difficult as possible.
But you have to go through so many bureaucratic obstacles compared with what you do. A lot of British companies don't trade with Europe anymore and suffer, and our economy and the European economies suffer as a result.
Let's be global trading again. Let's do what we've always done throughout our history and be a global trading nation. We don't want to be tied to what France and Germany want. We need to do what's in Britain's interest, surely.
But, Michael, you're making all these statements without having the figures to back them up. Our trade has grown. Our invisible trade has grown particularly. Our invisible trade wasn't affected by Brexit because the Services Directive was never fully adopted. Our produce exports have declined partly because we no longer count exports that have come into this country and go out again. That has had an effect. So tropical fruits and so on came into the UK, went to Europe, count as a UK export. Our exports, in spite of that, are up by 2% in nominal terms since we left. So this idea it's all been a disaster is false.
Well, I think you will find
overall exports have grown globally.
I think you will find, if we were to invite a group of economists in here, and there are Brexit economists, I accept that, and I think if you've got a group of economists in here, they would tell you that our economy is significantly, our GDP is significantly lower as a result of Brexit, and it's going to get lower still.
Surely that's to do with COVID and the lockdowns as well. You can't just say it's
even
Brexit.
Taking that fact
out. Could you just explain how the doppelganger models work that they use to show our economy has done less well?
I've no idea how they work.
That's the crucial point. You've no idea.
But these are...
Because what they've done is they've assumed that our economy would have grown in the way Canada, the US and New Zealand did. Why would we have done that if we remained in the European Union? And bear in mind...
that's your word against them, but I prefer the words of the views of hundreds of economists,
I expect people
thousands of economists, who agree, on the whole, that our economy has done worse as a result of Brexit.
Would you have preferred the letter signed to the Times by 364 economists the day the economy turned round in 1981?
Well, I think economists have learned the lessons of that.
You see, I just don't think they have. Andrew, sorry, I interrupted you.
But on your point, let me agree with you on one point. I do think that COVID had an effect in terms of mental health and people's and maybe people going back to work. I think that probably did have an effect there.
Calamitous.
And we've got to learn the lessons of that. Yeah. But I think to talk, what was it you said, a catastrophic spiral of decline we're in? I mean, why talk our economy down? Michael, you have a Union Jack on your lapel.
Can I get in,
And
please?
if people listen to you, they'll get to stop investing.
Look, I believe that Britain throughout our history has been a global free trading nation. We don't need Europe to tell us how to trade globally and how to create wealth. We have been the most successful nation on this planet in terms of free trade. We need to just do Brexit properly. The problem with the last government, I'm afraid, is that we didn't do it properly. We fudged the whole thing. We left Northern Ireland behind, and although Jacob really tried as minister in charge of this to make Brexit, the opportunities of Brexit happen, I'm afraid the last government really failed to harness those opportunities. This government definitely won't do it. So we have to look to the future. But ultimately, Britain can be successful economically if we're free. We're not free if we're shackled to rules and regulations and red tape from Brussels. That doesn't work, and the British people voted against it.
I hope you will deliver your message on free trade to Jeremy's friend, Donald Trump, who has caused more damage to world trade in the last year than probably anybody since the 1930s. It's not a different issue, because it affects our economy as well.
My pugnacious panel is showing how pugnacious they can be, even in the absence of the great Kelvin Mackenzie. Well, Michael, I'd like to bring you in on this, because there's nothing Shabana Mahmood has said recently that I have disagreed with. Probably not a lot Nigel Farage would have disagreed with. But it seems to me she's promising things that she can't deliver because she's dependent on a third party to do it. And the third party's shown no sign as yet of being willing to do these sorts of things.
Well, I think we are seeing the other signatories to the European Convention on Human Rights moving pretty rapidly at the moment, actually. And I think Stella's right to be optimistic on this.
But not France or Germany?
No, but I think they will probably come round in due course. These things, you know how the world works, you know how politics work. People don't suddenly change their minds all in one go overnight. But I think it's also interesting what Stella says about how actually the figures for Article 3 and Article 8 cases, they're not very many in this country. The press makes a big fuss about them. Divisive politicians make a big fuss about them. And it would be interesting to know whether the figures are equally low in the rest of Europe. I suspect they are. That's not a reason why these changes should not be made. But I think if you think that just by changing the law on this, that somehow the number of deportations is rapidly going to arise, I think both of you are going to be very disappointed.
Andrew, the argument they put, very reasonable, very calmly put. It doesn't give two hoots for parliamentary democracy, does it, and how our country is meant to be governed. And it's deeply unresponsive to the voters who put you there.
So, Jacob, exactly the point I was going to make. So if you come to my constituency, either of you, you will not find hardly anybody that would share your view. The British people want protection. Protection from violent criminals, protection from gang rapists, protection from sexual offenders, and all the things we've been discussing. The ECHR may have had good intentions to begin with, but no longer does it work in Britain's interests. And frankly, we are a democracy and we must be sovereign in our own land. So my constituents elect me as their Member of Parliament. We must make the laws and the laws must be implemented. You cannot have international judges dictating to countries like the United Kingdom with a proud record of human rights, an historic record of human rights and liberties. That is why we need to leave the ECHR.
We're going to have to move on. I would say, sorry. The United States President Donald Trump has launched a £7.4 billion defamation lawsuit against the BBC, accusing the broadcaster of misleading editing in a panorama documentary about the 6th of January, which spliced together two clips, making it look as though he encouraged the storming of the Capitol.
To cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women, and we fight. We fight like hell. We're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women, and we're probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them.
The BBC says it will defend the case, with the spokesman saying the BBC sincerely regrets the manner in which the video clip was edited, but added, "We strongly disagree there is a basis for a defamation claim." Meanwhile, talks on a £31 billion UK-US tech deal have reportedly stalled over disputed trade terms. Is President Trump right to take the BBC to court? And is the government too focused on appeasing the European Union at the peril of a lucrative trade deal with the United States? Well, my pugnacious panel is still here. The MP for Romford, Andrew Rosindell, and the journalist and broadcaster Michael Crick. Andrew, you're not the BBC's greatest fan, but do you really want it to have to stump up £7.4 billion of licence fees money to Donald J. Trump?
Look, the BBC have been disgraceful in what they've done. And it seems to me that for too long the BBC has been infiltrated by people of left-wing opinion. It's not representative of the British people. The BBC should be proudly promoting Britain and British values and be an impartial source of news. Now, they've proved over this splicing of Donald Trump that they're not, that they're being controlled seemingly of people of a political viewpoint, which is frankly inappropriate for what should be, a world-class news broadcaster, which is what we always thought it was. So, of course, I don't want the BBC to have to stump up that kind of cash, because it's my constituents that are going to foot the bill for this. The licence fee, frankly, it's out of date, and we have to relook at the whole of the BBC, how it operates. I want it to broadcast state occasions, Troop in the Colour, State Opening of Parliament. I want it to be world-class in news. I want it to do local things as well in our communities. But I don't want it to be a left-wing voice, because it's not really representative of what the British people are.
And do you think it should settle with Trump? Or should it fight the action?
That's a matter for the BBC to decide. I think it's a sad point in history for the BBC.
But Andrew, I also want to go on to this trade issue, that it's really important that People talk about the European Union, but our biggest single national trading partner is the US and has been for a very long time. How much should we give in to Trump? Or is Michael onto something, that Trump is just a bit of a bully and we should be quite tough about these trade talks?
So I think that the problem is we have a Labour government at the moment that's very keen to claim that they've negotiated these fantastic trade deals. We all know that trade deals are not as simple as they may sound. And Starmer wanted to be able to say, look at me, I've got a trade deal with India, I've got a trade deal with the United States, etc., etc. But the details have not been looked at in quite the way they should have been. So this is about politics. This is about the Labour government trying to say we've achieved what the previous government failed to achieve. And frankly, Jacob, I do think that in Trump's first term, when Mrs May was Prime Minister, I think we could have done a lot better then. We could have had a really good trade deal, had the Conservatives, had the backbone to seize the opportunity of Brexit and have a really good trade deal during that period. We flunked it. And so what's happened now is that Trump is emboldened and he's got a weak Labour Prime Minister in Starmer, who doesn't know what he's doing. And so he's walked into a trap, and that is why this trade deal is going pear-shaped.
Mike, I'll give you a final word on trade.
Well, I would say the same thing. Be tough. Bullies respected if you're tough back. If they see you're weak, they'll go for you.
All right, I'm glad to say that Michael Creek is a great expert on bullies. I wonder why. Anyway, a BBC spokesman said, as we have previously made clear, we will be defending this case. We are not going to make further comment on ongoing, dreadful word, shouldn't be used, continuing legal proceedings. The word ongoing is on my banned list.